Welcome everyone. We've cheated a little bit because there are way more than 15 tips about to come your way. So the 15 tips are more like 15 buckets that have got loads more tips crammed into them. So enjoy the bargain that you get in here for this 1 hour. And I'm really excited to introduce Layla and Emma to you all. This is really great for me, just selfishly, because we all share the experience of being producers of video-centered learning. But all with backgrounds in different types of content, so kind of commercial video content, TV and films. So we've got really great kind of shared experiences and a bit of diversity in there as well. A few bits of housekeeping. So you can ask questions throughout the webinar, and if they're kind of relevant in the moment, I will feed them in to Emma and Layla. If they're not as relevant, I'm going to save them till the end for when we get to a Q&A section. We'll have about 10 minutes at the very end. Also, we've got some polls that we will launch throughout the webinar. So we just want to get your thoughts and get you involved in the conversation. We've set them all as anonymous, so please just freely join in. And finally, we are also all on LinkedIn and would love to connect with you all. And you know, if you have any questions after today, feel free to get in touch with any one of us. We're more than happy. So 15 points. So we're going to move to point number 1 on the slides. We have the lovely Monica in the background who is managing our tech today. So the first point, really important, have a clear shared objective. So Emma, let's start with you. So what does a clear objective look like when you're talking about video in learning?
I think when it comes to getting an objective down, it really helps to channel the key messages, and it's really important to kind of refer back to that objective throughout the process. So, you know, making sure that everyone understands that for video specifically, it's not going to have everything that you need to cover in it if it sits within a module, let's say. So defining what that video's purpose is helps you to really streamline the messages and to really nail key points really well, rather than trying to throw the kitchen sink at it. And it helps in the long term when you're talking about scripts or edits. Someone comes up with like another thing to put in, it's like, no, this is the objective of the video, this is the reason that we're doing it, so that will kind of have to go somewhere else in the learning, or we'll have to think of a different way to address that. So it kind of keeps project from creeping, I think, is the important thing, biggest important thing for me.
Yeah, that's great. Layla, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with video, there's always a risk that you're doing it for the sake of it. So, you know, you'll suggest video as a project without really sort of thinking it through. And yeah, it's kind of about going back to that learning objective, isn't it? Why are we doing a video for this learning? How is this video enhancing it? You know, and I've had experience with, you know, really experienced SME who was top of his field, you know, really, you know, head of his discipline. But when we said, right, we're going to do some videos, his whole thing was, he obviously watched a lot of documentaries and he was a big fan of documentaries. So he had this vision that he was just going to be explaining the entire thing from beginning to end, you know, in this kind of wonderful documentary style. And, you know, that might have been great. And I think a documentary on his subject might have been great, but that wasn't what we were doing. So I think it's steering it back to, but what is the objective, not only of this module that this belongs to in the course, but of this particular video.
Yeah.
And I remember that being a real struggle as well, you know, and the way you bring it back is to sort of say, look, there's lots of evidence to suggest that in this kind of video, you want to keep it short. You know, you've got to grab attention within the first 7 seconds or something, haven't you? Otherwise, people might switch off. People switch off after 2 minutes. So it's kind of presenting that evidence and perhaps examples of the kinds of videos that you're, you know, that you're planning to do and why this video is important. Because there's, you know, there should be a clear reason for the video. Are you demonstrating something? Are you trying to personalize it just by introducing the expert? Yeah. Are you trying to introduce something, introduce the first bit of a concept? You know, are you putting something in context? I think it's just about not making sure that the objective is not just about having a video for the sake of it.
Very good point. Yeah, we've just launched one of the polls so you can see the results that have come up there. So this is just about kind of how much video content people have produced before. So we've got a real mix. So we're talking to an audience of people who have made lots of video and some who might be soon, is my guess. So moving on to the next kind of set of points, number 2 and number 3, these are all about kind of who we involve in the pre-production process and how we involve them. So first of all, be explicit about key contacts and key stakeholders from the outset. So Emma, why is that important?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons why it's important. I think the biggest one is, for me, is that video is so subjective. I think everyone has an opinion on how something should look or the messages that it should say, it should be putting across. And if you have a key contact and a stakeholder, you have a consistent person, a consistent opinion who can feed it back to other people and then report in and have, make decisions based on that. But as soon as you send an edit to 1,000,001 people who may not have the objectives before and may not understand the context of the video, you're going to be faced with a lot of feedback, and it's then filtering through the feedback to what is relevant to the objectives and what's just subjective. So for me, that's the biggest thing for having key contacts and stakeholders very early on, because they will understand the process and they'll understand how you got to this edit because they were part of the script writing process and things like that.
And what's the risk of not having it? What could kind of go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, this to me is what prep is all about. This is what pre-production is all about, isn't it? Is making sure that everybody knows what the plan is, so that, because it's expensive to rectify the further down the line you get with video. So this is about your paperwork, making sure that you do a brief, that you have a plan for the video and a reason for the video and an objective and what the key messages are. Because if you don't get the stakeholders that are involved in signing this off involved at this point, it's going to be really, really hard to get them, to get their feedback when it's potentially too late, on the day of the shoot, after the shoot, in the edit, So defining this, roles and responsibilities and key stakeholders is kind of what prep is all about, so that everybody knows what they're doing and everyone agrees on it before you go into it.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point for people who are newer to video as well, because it's an easy mistake to make. It's easy to think, okay, we'll get this video made and then we'll show the boss. And then the boss is kind of like, you've missed some fundamental points about our annual strategy. We've got to do all of that again. So it's a really kind of, it's a basic point, but it's really important, and it does get missed. So moving on to number 3, the clearly defined roles and responsibilities. I mean, there's a point that obviously all 3 of us could work independently. So me from a video production agency working direct with a client. Emma works in-house at Sainsbury's on the media productions, and but might sometimes work with an e-learning agency or with a video production company. And Layla, obviously you're an e-learning agency specializing in producing video content. So there are ways that we could cross over and work together, but also work independently on our own kind of projects. But why is it important to kind of be very clearly defined about roles and responsibilities of those different involved parties from the beginning?
I think you need one person. Personally, I think you need one person who's going to take charge of the kind of the creative side of things. And that person, it doesn't mean that person has final say or anything. It's just that person could then defer to other people, make sure everybody agrees. But I think one thing about responsibilities is there should be one person saying, look, this is the creative direction and this is all the creative decisions we want to make. Does everybody agree? And then relaying that to the rest of the team. And I think otherwise, you can get advice certainly from people, but I think one person saying, look, I do a lot of this and this is what I envisage for this video, it's really, really important. And I think if you don't do that, the person doing the filming on the day and the person who's done the prep might have different ideas of what they want from it. So the shoot itself might just be, a little bit more messy because, the person also, if you're interviewing somebody or the actor or whoever you're using, might not be clear either. So then you're not going to get, the key message, you're not going to get what you need. So I think one person taking responsibility for that, and then perhaps another person taking responsibility for the logistics behind it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Emma, would you add anything?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we have a relatively small in-house team. So the roles and responsibilities of our team members will vary depending on the type of project that we're working on, and also encouraging each other to upskill where we can, but it needs to be clearly defined at the start to say, okay, you were the cinematographer on this one last time, but now we want you to focus on the audio production, let's say, and making sure that it's really clearly defined at the start, so that when you do go onto set, everyone knows what part of the project is there that they're taking ownership of. And I think that's really important, so that nothing gets missed. So if, you know, if two people assume that they're on camera, then no one's prepped for audio production, and you know it's gonna have an impact. So when you know what your responsibilities are, you can own it, and you can make sure that everything within your remit is done to ensure that it's all kind of comes together properly and nothing gets dropped. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think I just want to add a point about scripting, because I often find that that's where there can be the most kind of confusion over who has the final say. So, you know, whatever that does end up looking like, it's really important to talk about it at the beginning. So it might be that someone is writing a first version of the scripts or providing bullet points, and then someone else writes the first version, but you know, who has the final say about the content. So I think, yeah, that's a key point. So I'm going to move on to the next.
Responsible
Oh, sorry,
as well
Layla.
for who's responsible for finishing it off? You know, who's
Yeah.
responsible for getting the final version to everybody that needs it as well? You know,
Yeah.
it's called more boring though.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to boring # not boring schedules. Number 4. So I have this sad reputation of being slightly obsessed with scheduling and, you know, a reliable source of a schedule. I'm sure you're both the same. So what is your experience of scheduling and the knock-on effects of not having one? So for this point, I'm talking more about the schedule for the entire project that you would create in pre-production. So it's probably one of the first things that you would do, but yeah, what's your experience and the knock-on effects of not having one? So Emma, start with you.
I don't remember a time when I've not had a schedule, if I'm honest. I think you lose sight of your milestones, don't you, without a schedule, and there's a risk of not having input when you need it. So when you're working with clients or stakeholders, there's going to be key points in the process that you need their attention to review scripts or edits or be available on the set. And if you don't outline that up front, then you might not have that availability. And we all know that there's so many moving parts to a production. If someone's not available on one day, it means, you know, not everyone's going to be available on the next day. So there's a lot of people and things to line up to get it right. And if you miss a date by not sharing a schedule with someone, then you could end up delaying your schedule completely, or not having the right people available at the right time, which again can be a cost to unpick further down the line.
True. And Layla, how about you and your love of schedules?
Yeah, I have never done a shoot without a schedule either. And I think even on the most basic shoots, if you've got, you know, busy clients and stakeholders involved, once you start with their availability, and that's where I would usually start, and you put a deadline and a date in the calendar, like this is when we're filming, what that message also gets sent out that there is a deadline here, you know, so the script you have to give me the feedback on the script in time for this. You have to, you know, we have to have agreement on what we're doing before this. You have to have done your preparation. You might have to write something before this date. So just getting something as simple as getting a date in the diary with the people involved kind of sets up that deadline, so that people realise that the work, the prep, the pre-production work has to get done before that date.
I think you've got a point.
It goes backwards. It's like you start at the end, don't you? And then you go backwards in the schedule, and you sort of, right, what is it that we need to get done this week and why?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that I think when we in our preparation call, because of course we had one, because that's what we do, we had a conversation about call sheets in a similar respect, and I think we can make that point again, but just that A schedule gives everyone involved the opportunity to see that they are not the only people involved in this project, and their action isn't the only project, and if the only part of the project, and if they don't meet a deadline, or if they need to change something, it will have an impact on others, because there's a much bigger picture going on around a production, essentially.
It gives visibility, doesn't it, of the whole, of all of the logistics involved and all of the people involved. Yeah,
that's it. So just moving on to number 5, approvals and amends and version control, essentially. So this is essentially, this is admin really, but it's vital. It's vital because it's very easy to lose track if there are lots of back and forth versions of scripts or even schedules. Yeah, it can be very easy to lose track and lose control of what's going on. And the worst case scenario is you end up on a shoot, for example, with an incorrect script. So what would you say about version control? Like, do you have any tips in terms of systems or processes or things that have gone wrong that we can learn from?
I'd keep it simple. This is what I normally do. I don't overcomplicate the kind of feedback process. And I think, again, this is your document. This is why one person needs to own it and make sure that the feedback gets gathered from the right places, that everybody gets shared, everyone has the right version. And, I'd stick to simplicity. I mean, if you're doing something a bit more complex than a script, like a storyboard, sometimes that, there's some good software that you can use to do online storyboards, and you can get people to give feedback online, which means that there's only ever one version. But yeah, I'd say just keep it simple and have, again, one person involved in having responsibility for that document and what version it's at, and has everybody given their input, and has that been implemented?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the learning designer, that would be me.
Yeah.
So you've got to, making sure everybody knows that it's okay, I'm going to look after this. As long as you just give me your feedback, I'll sort it.
Yeah. Okay. This relates loosely to a question that someone has asked in the chat, and that was Kamal, and she asks, what roles do we need in the process? So we didn't really dig into detail there. We made probably a few assumptions when we were talking about clearly defined roles and responsibilities. But I think, and obviously, Layla, you just alluded to the learning designer role, which is always absolutely key when you're designing video for learning. And it could be that the creative director is a learning designer as well, for example, but I think it just has to be the learning designer point needs to just be defined, obviously, at the beginning, like who is responsible for understanding the key learning points that need to be communicated in the content, and making sure that happens. And then from a video production point of view, and from a project management point of view within an organization, that you need someone to be taking on the project management roles. So both with the video production side of the project and the client side of the project, if you're working in that way. So a producer, a director, a learning designer, they're kind of key ones. And then obviously you have crew in terms of actually shooting a video. Any other key roles you'd want to call out, Emma, for example, from Sainsbury's, for example?
Coordinator, obviously.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. There's key. So for us, we have my manager comes from a learning background, and he is that creative learning designer type person. And then there's myself, who probably takes on the role as producer, but I've got a smaller title, which is fine. And then yeah, I think it's important to involve the SMEs, the subject matter experts, because at the end of the day, it's their content, and I think that's really important. To have someone from a learning perspective is invaluable. To have someone from a video perspective is also invaluable. But there's nothing there if you don't have someone giving you the content, and it's getting them in very early on to explain, like, we need your head. We can make it look pretty, and we can make it really powerful, but we need to understand what it is that you're trying to explain. So I think that's
really important, definitely.
Yeah.
So if we move on to the next set of points, which are kind of under the how bracket. So number 6 is about setting parameters for the creative team to operate within. And we are going to come on to a bit more about working with SMEs in a second as well. So, but firstly, just in terms of, I think what we were getting at here is that you can get, there are different types of people that get involved in video production projects, and it's very easy to get carried away if you don't have set parameters in terms of the creative. So whether that's about budget or time, or what's logistically possible for an organization, you need parameters in place. So I just wanted to ask, Layla, have you had any experiences where you've had to kind of pull a team kind of back from a plan that's maybe slightly too grand?
Yeah, loads. And I think this is one of the risks, isn't it, with video, is that when, like I was saying before with the guy who'd watched all the documentaries and stuff, people have an idea in their head of what, a video will do and what it will look like. And there's just so many different levels of video in terms of, how much it's going to cost, how much logistics is involved behind it, how easy it's going to be to produce. So for me, how I would normally deal with this is say, look, there are lots of different options for this. We can do it in this, really effective but quite simple way that isn't going to cost a lot. Give a whole sort of cost for that, and an example maybe of a video that's similar in nature.
Yeah.
And then right up to kind of, and here's sort of full drama, multiple locations. We're going to loads of different places, which means we're going to have multiple days in the shoot, which is more expensive in terms of people time. We're going to need actors. We're going to need to do, rehearsals and that kind of thing. Just be really open about how much is involved in each sort of level of video that you can have, costing it up, and just saying, if you have the time and the budget for this, then great, let's do this. But actually, depending on the learning outcome, you might not need it. It might not be the best solution. It's that weighing up, sharing that information about what's the best creative, solution for it, and what the cost is and what the scope is, within your project, and whether that's okay. So
yeah.
Levels, aren't there?
That's really great. I think that answers Andy's question from the Q&A, which is, if creativity is about expanding the horizons of a particular direction of travel, how does one go about setting parameters? And I think the first point is that these projects can come about in one of two ways. So either someone comes with a brief and they want you to come up with a creative and then put a price on it, and it doesn't matter so much. It really is about expanding the horizons of the particular direction of travel, whereas there are other occasions where it's like, we need to do this thing and we've got this much money, and that's where it's very easy to set the parameter. So you kind of work out, like, how many days filming can you get out of that, which is a key parameter. How many locations can we really cover within that space of time? How much crew and how much equipment can we afford for that? And you kind of go from there, really. So, even within defined parameters, there's still often scope for creativity. In fact, probably more creativity, because you have to be really clever with how you use, like, smaller budgets sometimes in this context. So, but yeah, it is tricky. It's always like you say, Layla, it's about the balance, isn't it? Of that
I think that's where the examples come in as well, because you can't expect everybody to visualize the same thing when they think of video. And so just showing an example of something that actually wasn't too high end or high budget, but was incredibly effective, can help to that place where they go, oh yeah, actually that would be really great for this project.
Yeah. Emma, would you add anything to that?
I think we come from a slightly different perspective with an in-house production team, where the cost of going into a store to film doesn't rack up day rates like it would if you're using an external company. So for us, managing the creative is it's slightly different. So it often comes down to what is the purpose of the video and what is the purpose of the learning, and we kind of try and use a bit of a spectrum of, does your learner care about the topic, or are they just really struggling to find the information that they need? Because that dictates quite a lot of the creative in our world. If there are colleagues that really care and really understand about this issue, they just don't have access to the right information at the time of need, then it's probably not a video, or it's probably a how-to animation or something. Whereas if it's something that our research is saying colleagues fundamentally don't understand how important it is to do this, then that's where we would probably insist on a bit more of a emotive and a bit more high-end production, where we have to change a mindset. We have to push people to realize that actually this could have a consequence on me, this could have an impact on me, and that's where we would push for that sort of a creative steer. So for us, it's more about what we're trying to achieve and less about budget, but there is also a budget factor, so that there are things that we can cover from our internal pot, so actors and certain equipment and things. But if they want like a drone across a supermarket, then that might have to come out of their pot, and that kind of brings them back to, okay, well, let's not get the drone. So there's a balance, but it's usually about what that main objective is and what we're trying to achieve.
Do you mean a drone inside the supermarket? Because that's
No,
fun.
I don't know if that would be I don't think that's allowed. It's over it.
Yeah, over it.
We'll talk about risk assessments in a minute.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So number 7, then let's move on to working with professional casts. So here we could be talking about actors or presenters. So at Nice Media, we do a lot of this, probably a lot more than you do at the minute, just because we do a lot of corporate drama. So with casting, just a tip from me would be to do as much of the preparation upfront as you can. And by that, I mean in relation to the communication with the agents and the actors, because you will end up with a lot of back and forth because of the layers of communication between agents and professional actors and presenters. So the more information you have up front before you even go to them, the better. So, and it genuinely will save you a lot of time. And I think another point about that is that it can be tricky with people's work. Like we've had situations, for example, where a cast member's had to pull out because, you know, a movie opportunity's come up and they have to take it. So even though someone might agree to do something, they also could easily pull out. So just it's something to be conscious of, depending on the kind of profile of the people that you're working with. And I just had a question for Emma here, because in terms of like preparing for a shoot and thinking about the efficiency of a shoot, in relation to working with presenters versus SMEs or colleagues. Emma, can you tell us a bit about the pros and cons of working with a presenter versus, for example, a store manager?
Yeah, this is bringing back a bit of a flashback from a shoot that I did relatively early on in my career at Sainsbury's, and we were trying to capture a video where we capture a store manager walking down an aisle of the supermarket, delivering a line to the camera. It was a one long shot, and then we would pull a trolley across the screen, and then we would reveal a different aisle in a different store with a different colleague doing the same thing. So it was a very nice idea, but we were encouraged to use colleagues because we want to make it real, and we were faced with we got the colleagues, we'd got in touch with them, we'd spoken to them about what we're trying to do, we sent them the scripts, we asked them to rehearse before we get there. You know, we did as much prep as we physically could in that space. And then when we arrived on set, we arrived at the supermarket, and the manager that we'd asked to use for the video hadn't rehearsed because she works night shifts and, you know, really long hours and all sorts. She hadn't rehearsed her script. And so we were on the day, we can't close any of the supermarket down. So we have to let customers come and go, and she's got to do this one long piece to camera, so she's got to memorize this script and time it right, and we have to get the trolleys, and she's being called back to the tills halfway through a take. It was really hard to manage, and that would have been so much easier if we had an actor or a professional with us on that day, because there wouldn't be any other responsibilities for them to support the store, and they would have had the time because we've paid them to rehearse and to, you know, we expect a level of commitment to the role when you pay for an external client. So there's always a balance. It depends again on what the creative is that you're trying to achieve. If you're, you know, expecting someone to rehearse a script, then you probably want to go down presenter or
yeah.
or actor. Whereas if you want to get inside someone's mind about what it's like to work in a supermarket, then you probably do want to do an interview piece with a colleague. So it's always about that creative direction that you want to take. But yeah, I get heart palpitations when I think about that one. We did it.
I was literally just thinking the same thing, that it was stressing me out just listening to you, to be honest. It was all that you were hitting all of my triggers with that anecdote.
But we ended up having to film a couple of them with actors in the end, because we didn't have the time to get it right. So again, it was an extra cost, an extra day. Thankfully, we were in house, and the days didn't cost us from a cameraman perspective, but we had to hire an actor that we hadn't prepared for. So it takes a lot more to unpick further down the line, as we were saying. If we knew we were going to use actors from the start, it would have been much easier to coordinate, I think.
We had there was a poll just a bit earlier that was about what stage people think is the most important in a video project. And most people agreed with pre-production. Some people were unsure, but I think hopefully this is showing that actually pre-production without it and without careful thought, it makes everything difficult. And it's not the case that everything can be saved in the edit. It's I mean, post-production is magical on many levels, if if you really think about it, but it can't. If you've got bad content, you've got bad content. It's very difficult to.
It's about expectations as well, isn't it? You can't. It's like Emma said. I completely agree with you. If you're expecting somebody to follow a script and do timings and things like that, it's not ideal. You would want to use a professional, ideally, in that setting. And I've never scripted or allowed SMEs to fully script their contributions, because they will find it harder. And I know this, they don't know this yet, but I know that they'll find it harder to follow a script word for word, because they'll stumble on a word or they'll forget an exact line. And that's a lot harder for them to do than just to talk naturally about something that they know. So I'd say bullet points, and that's it. Anything more complex than that, and you probably want to use professionals.
That's it. I think just to say, because you've seamlessly moved us into the next point, but just to say that under the poll has popped up and everyone seems to be voting at the minute. So this is about the value of pre-production. So what in people's experiences, what's the real value of thorough pre-production? So moving on then, Layla, you've just talked about it a little bit. I know that you've been doing loads of work recently with contributors from client organizations, lots of selfie style storytelling videos, that kind of thing. So can you tell us a bit about how you work with SMEs and client contributors to get the best possible result?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying on the very first point, I think it was, where it's, why are you doing the video? And I think if you're using experts who are talking about something, let's say it's about how to be a good manager or something like that, and you're talking to someone who's got years and years worth of management experience, I think what I try and do, again, to steer them away from wanting to script every line of what they say, is just tell a story because what you're doing with those kind of videos is you're trying to put them into context for the learners, aren't you? That's the objective, is to kind of say, this is, we're not just telling you something, we're going to show you how it's actually real. So what I would generally do there is just do as much prep as possible with any SME who's going to be a contributor on a video. Give them again some examples of the kinds of things, the kinds of videos, so that they've not got fixated on the wrong kind of thing and they're not getting too worried about it. I'll always write briefs, even if I want them to talk naturally. I will give them in advance. Look, this is the sort of style we want. We don't mind about ums and ahs. We want you to talk naturally. You don't have to do anything word for word. But then I'll also give them a sort of set of questions. So if I was interviewing you, these were the questions that I would ask. And it gives them a sort of sense of, oh, okay, so I can pretend somebody's asking me that question. And on the day, I might actually be a pretend interviewer in the background and ask them that question. Or there might be an interviewer, but them knowing exactly what questions are going to be asked. And then I also give them prompts for the kinds of things that they might want to respond with, so that they're really, really clear. So by the time it comes to the shoot, they've also had a conversation with me over the phone. So I'll always do a dry run over, even if it's just over the phone or over a web call or whatever. and I'll say, okay, so tell me about a time when, you know, what's your proudest moment of being a manager? Or, you know, what would you tell your 25-year-old manager self when you first got that job? And they'll just start absolutely talking in a natural way because they're an expert. So it's about getting out that expertise without them being nervous about what they're going to say in the video. It's like, no, it's not about that. It's about you and your expertise. And so it's, yeah, I'll talk to them a lot in advance and try and get that expertise out naturally.
So in other words, don't just kind of arrange a shoot day and send your SMEs an invite to turn up at a particular time to a particular room. They walk in and they're freaking out because they've got no idea really what's going to happen. So I think that is really important. Obviously, the process might vary depending on the kind of video we're talking about, but I think that's really, really key. So I'm going to move us on to the next point in the interest of time, which is about putting people first, which sounds obvious. And I think, Emma, you've got a really funny point about this. In terms of taking note of basic human needs and lunch. I'll let you talk about this a bit in terms of putting people first.
Yeah, I think it's one of the fundamental things, I think, when you're on a set, that you're making sure that everyone's happy, because there are people who are doing quite hard, you know, laborious work, like setting up lights, lugging kit around, all of that sort of stuff. They need a coffee break, they need breakfast. That people, I hate to say it because I put a lot of time and effort into call sheets, but the first thing that people tend to look at when they open a call sheet is what time they need to be there and what time dinner is. And that's like lunch, that's the key things. Where are we going for lunch? Is it hot in hand? Do I have to bring my own? That's the biggest thing that people want to know. So just always making sure that they're catered for and they're comfortable and they're happy, they've got plenty of water. I think from a small team working on projects, the smaller the team, the harder the work, the more work there is. You have to split it between you. So if you don't have someone there to look after people's well-being and get them coffees and teas and, you know, just pander to their needs, then people get agitated, and that impacts the dynamic on set. So I think it is really key. It is really important, especially if you've got actors who are, you know, doing a lot of costume changes and doing a lot of lines and stuff. Like, make sure they've got water, make sure they've got, you know, a chance to go to the loo, all of that stuff.
It's basic, but people take it for granted and forget to do it.
And there are times where, you know, from the past, I've been on sets where the director's like, we're going to shoot in a field. We're going to shoot this in a field. So everyone's lugging all of this really heavy equipment because kit hasn't got lighter. You're lugging equipment into the middle of a forest. Where are the toilets? You know, I'm looking like a slow cooker of like a gallon of chili to make sure that people have something warm to eat when they're there, because that's literally the only thing that's getting them through all of this, is going, I'm going to get this sorted, and then I will have a hot bowl of chili. And that's the amount of times that's so much more appreciated and brings people together. I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
I think that this goes back to our production days, doesn't it, Emma? Because I think we both have experienced the sort of big shoots, and it struck me when I looked at this question that, you know, you have your creative team on set, and this is from massive shoots to small, but on a massive shoot you'll have your director, you've got your makeup artist, you've got your art director and your actors. They've got to concentrate on getting all of this stuff done, and it takes a long time. Behind that, there's about 80 other people on the crew, isn't there? And they're all to do with just basic human needs, like where's everybody going to sit for a rest? How's everyone going to get a shelter if it rains? You know, where are the loos? You know, how do we all just grab water and hot drinks when we need them? So, and even just so how that relates to a much smaller shoot is that even if there's only 5 of you, you know, going on a shoot, just people knowing in advance that there's going to be a break, there's going to be access to coffee, there's going to be some sandwiches at lunchtime, we've got bottles of water. It's just really important. And that call sheet is something I will do even for the smallest, simplest shoot, because it's just a 1-sheet document that has everybody's name and number that's involved in the day. So you can just, if you get stuck somewhere, you can just ring. Where exactly you're going to be, exactly what time everyone's going to be there, exactly what time your thing is going to be, how to get into the building, because that, you know, that's one thing that you do forget quite often is there a pass to get into this building? If somebody goes for a refreshments or a break, are they going to get stuck in some corridor for half an hour, and that's going to just mess the whole day up? Just so all of that kind of information, and it sort of shows people as well how much you've got to do in the day. So it's another way of communicating to them that, look, we can't just mess around here, there's a lot to do, and we've got only until 2 o'clock to do it, or whatever it is. So yeah, for me, that call sheet is about communicating that we have thought about the basic human needs, and that you'll be all right on the day. You don't need to bring a packed lunch, you don't need to worry about things and where you're going to get your coffee from in the morning if it's
So this relates to the next point, number 10, and a couple of points after that, actually. So that call sheet, you know, when I produce a video project, that call sheet will be this ongoing document that's getting populated throughout a period of time before it gets sent to anyone, because it really is that important. And obviously one aspect of that is this shooting schedule. And shooting schedules are really important because you've only got a day to do all of the things that you need to do. But I think one of the risks with the shooting schedules is that you're not realistic, and that you're over optimistic about what's possible within the time. And Layla, you just alluded to one very simple sounding point about access to the building. And the risk here is that you can literally lose up to an hour from if you haven't planned ahead and worked out how long it takes to get in and communicated with the people who are going to receive you at the other end. You can easily lose an hour, which could be significant in terms of making your shoot run later. And then people, the crew, the cast, anyone involved is going to get more and more stressed, thinking that they're not going to finish till into the evening. So this shooting schedule, it's not only important to have one, it's important that it's really it's realistic, essentially.
And actually the whole act of putting it together helps you to realize what you need to do to prepare, isn't it? So you'll start by going, right, okay, we've got 4 things to get today, let's put those in the middle of the day. Then you need to add, you know, all the crew turning up half an hour at least before that to do the setup, and the contributors turning up a little bit before that. And then you need access to the building in order to get to that point where you're setting up. Then you need, you know, and then once you put the lunch break in, actually the day expands a little bit. So then, okay, what have you got at the end? You've got pack down time at the end. And it's, you know, even as simple as how are your contributors and everybody getting there? Because if they're driving, where are they going to park if it's an unfamiliar place for them? You know, is there parking? Can you point them to the latest NCP so that they're not 20 minutes late because they couldn't find anywhere to park or they didn't know where to go? You know, even down to that, you know, simple human element is really, really important. And just the act of putting the schedule together, it makes you consider all of those things a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've just launched another poll, which is, have you ever had an incident occur in a video project that's led you to need a plan B? So if anyone has answered yes, please do tell us about it in the chat. It'd be just interesting to hear what kind of experiences you've had. So just kind of moving on from your points there, Layla, on one of our points, number 11, is about having a key person responsible for kit and equipment, because obviously you don't want to arrive and not have the things that you need. And that includes things like batteries, and part of the pre-production plan should include where you might be able to charge those batteries at the shoot if you need to. So I don't want to dwell on the kit point too much. I want to get into kind of location, recce's and risk assessments, because that relates a lot to the call sheet and the planning, and also is very relevant at the minute due to COVID as well, and the need for social distancing and possibly a little bit more time than usual. So what do you need to cover when you're on a recce from a creative point of view, Emma, in terms of thinking about what you need to shoot?
Yeah, I think when it comes to recce's, I think it's something that often don't get really they kind of get overlooked if you're not part of the media production team, that you have to go and see the space that you want to film in, because, you know, a supermarket, you would assume the supermarkets are relatively similar, and forgive me, I'm using supermarkets as an example a lot, but to your point, where are you going to plug in your batteries you know, if you run out? Have you got a green room for your actors? Is there a space that you can boycott for the day to put all of your kit in and to put that person in with the kit for the day? and make sure that there's changing rooms available for actors, make sure that you've got access to the building, people know that you're coming. Can you close off an aisle for an hour? Which one's the best aisle to close off? And all of that stuff. How big is the space? Always take the camera, take the camera, get a couple of shots, see what it looks like, see if you, because then it helps you understand, okay, we need some more lighting, or we need some diffusers because supermarket lighting's horrendous, and all of that sort of stuff that is going to be a problem on the day if you don't address it. I think that's the key. It's making sure that you know what you're walking into and nothing's a surprise, and you know where you're going to be, you know who's coming and where they need to report to, all of that detail. If you need to register your car in the car park in case anyone gets a fine, all of those things that need to be understood before you arrive, and access always, in offices and stuff, having access, you need a pass, you need to let them know in advance, you need to know what time everyone's arriving, all of that stuff.
I just want to add to that I think one of the key advantages of having done all of that prep is that crew will always ask the question, when's this happening, or is this available, or is there aircon in the room, and if you don't know the answers, that will make them really nervous. So before you've even arrived, you've created an atmosphere of people being feel a bit icky about this shoot. So I think being able to communicate that to other people involved is also really important. So I'm gonna move on. I did just mention aircon there because aircon can be a nightmare. It can be controlled space sometimes from some satellite somewhere that you can't access to turn it off, and it can cause noise problems, as Layla said. So it's always worth thinking about aircon in a recce or a risk assessment. So the next point is about the use of reference videos or other visual assets in pre-production in order to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of the creative of a project. So I think, Layla, you've talked about this a little bit already, about showing contributors, for example, what kind of video you're trying to make so that they don't get carried away with another idea that makes them nervous. What else would you say about kind of sharing reference assets early on in pre-production?
Yeah, I think it gives everybody a sense of what you're trying to go for, because as I say, I think everybody has their own opinion of what a video might be, and everyone can sort of visualizes something. So I think it's really important. I also think, the other type of video that's really good for, meeting learning objective is doing a demonstration. So if you're demonstrating something, how are you going to get access to that thing? What's it going to look like? And what's the end video going to look like? So showing reference videos for, the demonstration of something as well, and helps you think creatively about what shots you might need, but it also gives everybody on the team, an idea of, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if we could get access to that? So yeah, I just think it's a really nice idea, even if you have to caveat it with, this isn't exactly what we're going to do, but this gives you an impression of the kind of style. Mm-hmm. I think always caveat reference videos. I've been constantly through that before as well.
To manage expectations, definitely. And I think moving on from that, I think as well as reference videos, obviously a more accurate thing to do are shot lists and storyboards in terms of actually planning what your project will look like. Can you tell us a little bit about your use of storyboards in pre-production for learning videos?
Yeah, I mean, I would normally use a very simplistic kind of storyboard for, things like SME expert videos and things like that. Where I'd want to use a bit more detail is if you're doing, if animation is going to be involved in any way. So you could have a mix of live action and animation, or you could have an animation. And I think there, the style that you're going to use is going to be everything. It's going to be really, really important to the client. So we do detailed storyboards, and even sometimes animatics, which show a little bit of what the movement is going to look like within the animation, because it's not just about the visuals, it's about how it moves around the screen, obviously. So yeah, I think depending on what all of the different elements of the video are going to be, depends on whether you really need a storyboard. I think some people think that you always need a storyboard for every kind of video. I think sometimes it's overkill. It depends if there's like Emma, your example, the person's going to speak and then the trolley is going to have to come in at this point. That's the kind of thing that you would want at least something to show people what you were saying. But yeah, so you sort of have to assess the need for a storyboard. List absolutely, always, because you know that's another thing that you're communicating to people beforehand and saying that these are the shots that we're going to get. Is everybody in agreement? Are we okay? Do we have the go ahead? Does everybody think this is going to work?
The shot list is an interesting one, isn't it? It kind of also ties into the recce, because if you do a recce, you become quickly more aware of the visual opportunities at a particular site, and then you can incorporate that into your shot list. Otherwise, it's a bit of guesswork, or a big conversation with people at the location trying to work out what's possible. But nothing can beat the inspiration you get from actually being at the actual location. And also the shot list enables you to plan your shooting schedule, because then you know exactly how much you need to capture within a space of time and where it actually is. So that's very handy. So Emma, would you add anything about storyboards or shot lists?
Yeah, I think everything that Layla said is spot on. It helps people who aren't necessarily that creatively mindset. A lot of our SMEs can be analytical or working in buy-in, so they're not used to seeing a storyboard. So having that animatic to support it absolutely helps them visualize how the rest of it's going to work. So often when we do a storyboard for animation, which we're doing quite a lot of at the minute, having an animatic to support that helps people to really understand the way that it's going to kind of flow. And the same with the reference videos as well. To sometimes you can propose something and it sounds a little bit abstract and a little bit out there and a bit risky, but when you say, this company has done it and it worked really well, and look at all of the success that it had, see the amount of response it's had, or a theme of video. So like a reaction theme. We love watching Gogglebox as a nation, and watching people watch stuff is a really trendy thing at the moment. So if we're going to propose that to an SME, it doesn't sound really bizarre when you go, look, it's everywhere, and it kind of reassures them that what you're trying to achieve is different but really really powerful.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a great point. I'm just going to add a point about shot lists, and if anyone ever wants an example of anything like this, we can send it across. But in terms of it's a bit of a poor person's version of a storyboard, which is that you can have a kind of table that explains the plan for what's going to be on screen at any one time in columns. So you can have, the visual, then you can have the voiceover or the dialogue, and then you can have other sound effects and graphics, for example, at the end. So you can show the interplay of all the different elements of video in a table, minute by minute, to communicate what's going to be happening. And that can sometimes be good enough for a lot of people to kind of, okay, I see what you're trying to do here now, and I see the different layers that we need to consider and when they come in. So yeah, if anyone wants to see an example of that, just let us know. I'm going to move on now to the final 15th point, which is to have a plan B and also a plan C. And C for us these days is for COVID, because we've had to come up with a lot of plan Cs. So Emma, can you tell us a little bit about your experience of having to come up with a plan B or a plan C?
Yes. Very recently, last year, probably about a year ago, we were in discussions to come up with a video for inclusion. So again, it was about explaining why it's important to be inclusive in the workplace. So we knew it needed to be a really powerful video. And we also knew that it was important to use a Sainsbury's colleague who has a real life experience to really add an extra element of emotion to it. So our plan was to find a colleague, bring them up to our offices in Anstey, shoot a really nice interview with kind of two shots, a front shot and a side shot, and ask them questions about their experience going through a mental health issue and the support they had from a manager. That was the original plan. COVID happened, and we were trying to work out, obviously we couldn't do anything for a long time anyway, but when we came out of COVID, when we came out the first lockdown, we were working out the best way to to film it safely with COVID restrictions. So we'd written up a risk assessment specifically for any COVID shoot, so like a guideline document. So in line with that, we were like, okay, well, we'll go down to them, we'll go to London, we'll drive there, single cars, take our own kit, one person on set, dial in another person to help support from any visuals or directorial points of view. We'll book this auditorium, it's a massive space for 2 people, really safely distanced, all of that jazz, masks, everything. And then London went into lockdown. So we had to scrap that. And obviously, for all of this, our deadline's not moved. You know, we still have to deliver by, you know, X date. So there's no room in the schedules at all. So we ended up getting an animator on board, and doing quite an emotive animatic, a bit like, you know, the Headspace characters, like that. So we used that reference to show what we were talking about, because we had to convince them that animation was also a suitable way to go. And then we filmed a Zoom call with the colleague, so we still had his voice, we still did the interview, but
Brilliant.
we just used the audio to narrate the animation. So it worked out beautifully. It's a wonderful piece of work, really proud of it. But yeah, that was plan C.
Yeah, brilliant. I think when we talked about this in our planning session, you mentioned something which I thought was excellent about maybe we clung on to plan A for too long. And I think obviously it comes with experience, being able to identify when you're maybe clinging onto a plan for too long. But sometimes you've just got to think, do you know what is the worst thing that's going to happen? I think I just need to bin that idea. It could be as simple as like, oh, we're not sure if we can get a particular presenter, just move on. If you're not getting the positivity in the first instance, just move on and look for something else, because it can again impact everything else. But obviously I'm really glad that turned out well for you in the end. That sounds lovely. I'd love to see it, actually. I don't think we've seen it, so that'd be really nice. So we've got like 2 minutes, so I just kind of want to sum up. Kamal, I hope we answered your question about the storyboards, and we'll definitely send over the example of a shot list. So yeah, finally, I just want to firstly let you know that our next webinar in this series is more focused on the creative and development side of pre-production, and that will be in June. I think it's on June the 10th on a Thursday at 10:30 again. So do put it in your diaries and we'll make sure we send you all the info. The second thing I just wanted to let you know about is that Tom from Nice Media has been creating and publishing some brilliant little videos that are called What Can TV Teach L&D, which is really relevant to your example there, Emma, how you were kind of going for Gogglebox style at the beginning, and obviously it's moved on since. But it's in each episode, Tom looks at a current kind of popular TV show and takes a scene and kind of reflects on it in terms of what we can apply to an L&D video context. And obviously there are certain filmmaking techniques that we have used in projects, so it's quite fun when you see them, you know, in an actual TV drama. So I've posted a couple of links to them on LinkedIn. One is Bridgerton, the other one is It's a Sin from Channel 4. And the other examples are Spiral and also The Queen's Gambit. And the first one was actually about Gogglebox. So that's had a lot of attention today, has Gogglebox. So yeah, so that's everything. So thanks for all of the questions that everyone has fed in. We really appreciate you being here. And if there's anything else that you want to ask any of us, you can get in touch afterwards. And thank you to Emma and Layla for sharing all of your experience and expertise. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
So thanks, everyone. The good news is that we've just had some poll results, which are from the last poll, which is about how confident people feel about video pre-production after this webinar, and 96% of people feel more confident.
Hey, that's not bad.